The American working class was told that America was the king of the hill, but nobody here was prepared that it would come to an end. That for the first time in a century, we actually have an economic competitor called China. When Bernie Sanders explains what he means by socialism, he refers to Denmark. That's a socialism in which the government is very active, very regulatory, taxes a lot, and provides a shitload of public services, but leaves the private capitalist sector pretty much in private hands. That's a kind of socialism. It's called socialism. Even here in America, people the post office is socialist. They understand the government does something, could be socialist. Stupid, but okay. Americans don't understand this stuff very well. The other sample is the Soviet Union, in which the government comes in and says, we're not going to simply tax. We're not going to simply regulate. We're going to take over. We're going to own and operate the enterprise as a state entity. Soviet Union did that with its entire industrial apparatus and with a good chunk of its agriculture, too. Not all of it, but a good chunk. State farms, which are different from collective farms, those are private. By the way, Americans don't understand that Russia never abolished private property, ever. It's always been an important part of their economy, always, and that the state was limited. But relative to anything in the West, the state is a very big player. China didn't do either one of those. China is unique because it's a hybrid. China is 50% state-owned and operated enterprises and 50% private, all under the control of a powerful government, which is in turn under the control of the Communist Party. That's a unique structure. Russia didn't have that. Russia never allowed half of its industry to be private. And the Scandinavian socialists never allowed their socialism to include an immense governmental sector. In American mentality, it's large because relative to ours, it's bigger, but it was never very significant. That's why there have always been Swedish millionaires, billionaires, and all of that. They've allowed all of that. China now allows it also to be a private sector, includes Jack Ma and other big billionaires. But it's a unique model, not the Soviet. They broke from that. Mao broke from Russia in the late 50s, early 60s on these fundamental questions, opening that space. Other countries didn't do that. North Korea didn't do that. Cuba even didn't do it. Vietnam didn't do it. The Chinese did it. The reason China is ahead is it figured out that form of capitalism, which could get it out of poverty, which was its number one goal. 100 years of humiliation of China, was it because it was poor, backward technologically, underdeveloped, like the whole global South, like all of Africa, like most of Asia, like most of Latin America. The name of the game for them was, above all else, not the struggle of capitalism and socialism. The leaders were worried about that. For the mass of people, how to get out of poverty, all that meant, and begin to live life. The Chinese Communist Party understood that, in part because of their differences with the Soviet Union stuff that we talked about. And they understood that's the way we're going to try to do it. With all the risks, all the possibilities of failure, we're going to do a hybrid of 50. We're going to let the private go under our control. Meanwhile, keep our control by having half the economy right under our That's how we're going to do it. And the Chinese, in my judgment, are on the cusp, as we are in the United States, although for completely different reasons, given our very different situations. We're on the cusp of discovering what European feudalism discovered, that the highest achievement, capitalism in China as this hybrid, is also the last achievement. The Louis in France, who built Versailles, were the same family of Louis who ended up on the guillotine with their heads chopped off. I'm, of course, not suggesting anything remotely like that could or would ever happen here. Pause for effect. But the point is, Now comes the question, what do we need to do better than what the Chinese have done? What's the next stage? How will people define the problems that the Chinese have and will have? Even the Chinese, they're very wise about that. They understand their system has problems, different from what they used to have. Thank God, they're much better off than they used to be, but they have all kinds of economic and other problems. Here's my prediction. These problems will, sooner or later, and I hope it's sooner, be addressed by daring to relearn Marx's lesson. Take a look at how you organize production. The notion that you have to have a few people at the top who run the show and a mass of people underneath who do the work is your problem. You've got to get rid of that. It's a little bit like understanding that for the centuries that there was slavery, there were all kinds of people who understood those slave systems had a problem. And there were all kinds of people who understood, let's solve the problem this way. Give the slave a better diet. Give the slave some more clothing. Put the slave in a decent house. Stop beating the slave. Don't sell the wife against the husband. Blah, blah, blah. And then there were people who said, no, you ain't going to solve your problem that way. You know what your problem is? The master-slave relationship. That's got to go